What do you do right now if you drafted Jamar Chase, Tee Higgins, and or Chase Brown? Major pressure point for a lot of managers. I thought about drafting Tee Higgins at the tail end of the second round, pick number 23 of my Premier Fantasy Football League draft. Uh, couldn't rationalize doing it. At 30 seconds on the clock, I knew that I was going to take Lamar Jackson if no one jumped out at me, and no one meaning Jackson Smith and Jigba was the one receiver who was undervalued enough where I would have taken him ahead of Lamar Jackson and then tried to take Jackson or Josh Allen coming back the other way. But Smith and Jigba was taken very early. I'd like to think maybe because all the folks who are in my league are at least in my community, Fantasy Football for Winners community. I don't want to presume that they all read my stuff, but a lot of them read it and comment and respond. I'd like to think somebody said, yeah, I buy into that. I think he's going to be a bargain. But Tee Higgins was someone that could have been a dramatic mistake if I had taken Tee Higgins just to take a receiver instead of taking an elite quarterback. Who knew that Joe Burrow was going to get hurt? In another universe, Higgins might have been a top 15, top 18 receiver as long as he's healthy. No problems. The reality is if you have Higgins now, what do? You can't really drop him. You can't really trade him. You're just kind of stuck. Jamar Chase is slightly different. I did talk about on the blog the trend of number one overall wide receivers each year not finishing close to number one, that they elevate very quickly from something to number one. In Jamar Chase's case, he's always been hovering, so that's not fair to say this suddenly. But that happens where they hit number one and then they drop. Again, if Joe Burrow were healthy, maybe Jamar Chase would be top 5 right now. I don't know that he'd be number one. But the reality is with Burrow out until potentially mid-December, you are stuck with Jamar Chase unless, and this is the big unless, you can pitch to a manager, hey, Burrow's coming back for the fantasy playoffs. You're 3-0. You're headed towards the postseason. I'm willing to give up on Jamar Chase and give him to you for considerably less than what he's worth, you knowing that you will then have an elite receiver for the fantasy playoffs, but I need something better in return. I need something better right now. You could go that route and you might be able to work out a deal. But I would prefer to just keep Jamar Chase. And that is because what happened last week with Cincinnati was the worst of all scenarios. Jake Browning is not that bad of a backup quarterback. The offense is not going to be shut down that easily most weeks. And I think you have to trust in the fact that Chase will get his targets, get his yards, hopefully get his touchdowns, and be a weekly starter. The hardest one is Chase Brown. And this is one where I regret not going back to my data and instead just saying, well, he's the unquestioned starter. So I ranked him around his ADP. His RB ADP was 10. I had him at a 7 this summer. I put him ahead of Josh Jacobs and Devon Achane. I just figured he had a top-heavy offense with Joe Burrow quarterback. What could go wrong? Chase Brown is not the same. You could, perhaps blame the offensive line partly. You could blame any number of things, including Burrow's injury, but Chase Brown is not the same. Going through the numbers, and I've talked about this before, but it's important to talk about again in this context. Brown was a 5th-round draft pick. He was not a highly touted running back. Coming into the league, I really liked him. I wrote about him on the blog as a potential heir apparent to Joe Mixon, that Chase Brown had bell cow experience. That was very important. And in an offense this good, if you have bell cow experience and you can prove that you can be just good enough, then you can get 16-plus touches and get a bunch of touchdowns and get some catches and basically be a top 20 running back for several years. Last year, Brown was the RB10. It seemed like that was a realistic midpoint of what he could do and that he could pop comfortably inside the top 10 if things broke right. Breaking right means he stays healthy and Joe Burrow stays healthy. Well, plan B didn't work out, or part B of that didn't work out. So now we're stuck. We're stuck with a backup quarterback a reduced offense. I don't think it's dramatically as reduced as we saw last week, but it's reduced. And Chase Brown is scuffling. In the history of fifth round draft picks, going back to 2000, I have this on my spreadsheet. There have been 3 instances of a fifth round pick finishing in the top 10. So Chase Brown is one of those. There's only 2 instances of a sixth rounder finishing in the top 10, only 2 instances of a seventh rounder. Between those 3, I mean, basically, I'll just break it down. It's about a 1% chance for each of those historically. There's historically about a 4% chance that any of those, 5th, 6th, or 7th round pick, will finish in the top 20. That given all the cases, all the times that a 5th rounder, 6th rounder, or a 7th rounder has played a season, there's a 4% chance. 1 out of 25 times they finished in the top 20. It is very hard to do, obviously, and it is very hard to do repeatedly. Even top 30, 7.3%. Those are not good odds. Chase Brown defied expectations. He did it because last year he was the clear-cut number 1 in a high-powered offense. It worked. It should have worked, could have worked, might have worked again this year, but it's not just Joe Burrow's absence. And my point is that Brown came into this league not as a highly touted running back, but as a good running back with bell cow experience who was put in an ideal offensive situation. The concern that I have with Chase Brown is not that someone's going to come in like Taj Brooks and take his job. The concern that I have is that Cincinnati will not play him out through the season if he continues to scuffle. That essentially he might be, splitting time with someone as they take a look at somebody else. They don't want Brown to get hurt ahead of next season, have a serious injury in meaningless games. There's a whole bunch of scenarios where if the Bengals continue to slide, Brown's value plummets this season. And of course, in Dynasty, serious questions heading into his age 26 season next year, whether or not the Bengals will view him as the guy, or if they will look to the draft and try to get someone in there who can at least support him and or compete for the starting job. We have to remember, starting running backs often, with some exceptions, often are not starters for more than 2 or 3 seasons. This is Brown's second full season, essentially, starting. And we should not expect that he's going to be a starter for 4 or 5 years. It generally doesn't work that way. The probabilities show that we should not base our decisions on that. And yet, based on his ADP, based on my rankings, I accept blame. I viewed Brown as kind of a, sure, let's run it back kind of player. So if you have him, I think you're kind of stuck unless you're willing to say to somebody, hey, he's still the bell cow. He's going to turn things around, and try to trade him for top 20 to 25 value. If you can somehow get that, I would pounce on it. It doesn't mean that Brown is not going to turn things around. It just means that the risk of him not starting games when it matters most has increased exponentially since the start of the season. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. We'll see you tomorrow.